Hello, hi. Welcome to what is probably the final video on this channel. This is going to be a reflection of sorts, and I didn't want to edit this, so I'm going to hopefully do it in one take for the sake of transparency. Also, I don't want to have to edit the sound around this. I just want you to hear kind of what I hear. And also I've got some earbuds in right now just so I am not distracted by things happening outside me in the gallery right now. Thank you for joining me on this very strange 2-week journey for Self-Care Forever 2001. It has been a really interesting process, to say the least. I thought I knew what I was getting myself into starting this journey, trying to grow a social media following in a whole bunch of different ways, but also I don't think that I was quite ready for what was going to happen, which I guess I'll get into in a little bit here. So look, to finish it off, I've got a bunch of questions that my co-creator Mary has sent me. Mary has been wonderful in doing all of the background stuff for Self-Care Forever and doing it remotely from South Australia. I've done everything else that you've seen here. I've done all of the video editing, I've done all of the photo editing, anything that you see on TikTok or Instagram or YouTube. That's all done by me and has been done by me in the past 2 weeks. But I luckily wasn't alone for the whole scale of this project. So here are some of the interview questions that hopefully I can interview myself on and find out how I really went with this project. So the first one is, what does self-care mean to you? And I think after this whole 2 weeks, self-care can actually mean whatever the hell you want it to mean. Originally, I went in thinking that self-care was about going and taking long walks on a beach, or doing a face mask, or going and getting your nails done, or something like that. But actually, it can be something really simple. It can be taking a nap. It can be taking a moment to reflect on your day. I think we're doing things that are self-care constantly, and we're doing things in our lives all the time that are self-care, but perhaps not sold to us as self-care. And I think that obviously the way that businesses sell us their products, being like, you are not doing self-care properly if you're not doing this, I think that needs to be, relooked at, reworked. I think that people need to at least have an understanding and a critical mindset of how the self-care industry pushes these things onto us, when actually a lot of the things that we can do for self-care are completely free. And that's been quite an eye-opening and quite an inspiring thing to discover during this process. So self-care is whatever the hell you want self-care to be, and whatever works for you, but it's not a one-size-fits-all. It needs to be tried, it needs to be tested, and you need to play around with it. But what's going to work for you is not necessarily what's going to work for me, and what's going to work for me absolutely is not going to work 100% for you. Do I have any self-care rituals that I find helpful? I'm going to be honest, and I'm going to say that I've done barely any self-care in the past 2 weeks. I've had a absolutely exhausting time, and I spent so much time on the production side of things, of getting out all of this content for other people to enjoy, that I don't think I looked after myself once. Which is why I'm utterly shattered and exhausted. But a self-care ritual for me, what perhaps I'm going to take out of this experience and this experiment, is probably doing the things that are free and understanding that that's looking after myself, rather than the need to spend money to look after myself, or do something that's quite performative to look after myself. It really is just actually, it can be quite a introspective process, and that's as simple as like taking a breath or checking in on yourself at the end of the day. It's something that I absolutely need to do because I spend so much time like zipping around doing one thing, doing another thing. I work a lot and I think that could really help break up part of my day in a way that I don't feel so incredibly overwhelmed all the time. So I think I'm going to try and employ some of those things that some of the amazing people that I've spoken to have said instead. I think that's probably a good enough answer for that question. I don't know, whatever. Is self-care good for our mental health? Yes, of course it is. Of course it is. Self-care is something that really helps improve our mental health. And I think what was said so nicely was everyone's got mental health, we've just got levels of mental health. And we just cope with our mental health differently. But self-care in its truest form of doing whatever the hell it is to make sure that you're caring for yourself is inherently incredibly good for our mental health. I think when it becomes about pushing out a product or about performing an action or about spending enough money to convince yourself that you've done something to keep yourself well rested, I think that's not great for our mental health. But I think kind of going back to these things that are free and are easy, we should be doing them all the time. And some of us are already doing these things without realizing, and you're already looking after yourself. So yeah, it's inherently very good. And then is the self-care industry good for our mental health? I guess I want to put my foot down and say absolutely not, but it's not as black and white as that, is it, really? I've been editing the interview with Dr. Sarah Wilson today, and things aren't obviously black and white. There is self-care things that are sold that have got scientific evidence behind them, and they're absolutely wonderful, and there are things that don't. So I think that there is a level of searching that everyone needs to do for themselves to be able to find out whether something like, I don't know, an LED light mask is actually going to be beneficial for their skin than just dropping $150 like a maniac, like we did. But I think, my God, my brain's kind of spinning out of control. I think it's more layered than just being like, no, of course the wellness industry is terrible. I mean, Goop's awful. Like, absolutely do not buy anything from Goop. Don't even, Gwyneth does not need more of your money than she's already got. Don't sue me, Gwyneth, thanks so much. But there are other things that, of course, are really good and useful that are sold as like a self-care product. I guess if your body's not able to take vitamins in properly, or maybe you're not getting the right diet for them, then of course a supplement is going to kind of help you get really peppy. And I'm such a vitamin queen. That's part of my self-care ritual. I mean, the tons of shit that I put on my face in the effort of looking after my skin, that's self-care to me. It's a ritual to me that makes me feel great. Some of it has got scientific backing. Some of it's maybe just a placebo and just makes me feel like I'm doing something good for my skin. But that's all part of the industry as well, right? Kind of feeding us into this notion that we need to look a certain way, or we need to feel a certain way, or we need to behave a certain way. I think that's where it gets really toxic. But also, I'm not the person to be like, I don't subscribe to that, because I absolutely do subscribe to that at the end of the day. And unfortunately, I probably will still leave this experiment subscribing to that, but maybe being more aware that, like, actually all of this crap that's being sold to us maybe is not going to make the big difference that I thought it was going to make. And if I think about, I hit a really low point a couple of weeks ago with my weight where I considered having gastric bypass surgery. And although that is like a very you know, that's a thing. It was like I looked into that, and then I also looked into getting like non-invasive tummy tucks and stuff. But when you actually kind of look into the research into it, it's not a fix-all solution. It's not going to make me instantly skinny. So I guess I'm glad to have this idea of, and to be more aware that this industry is not necessarily like a fix-all. You need to really kind of do your due diligence in looking into these things. And I think that that's something that I can take away, and I think everyone should take away from that. When were you happiest? I can tell you when I was not happiest. I think I was happiest probably in the first week when I was interviewing people. And the reality of not having to put out this content so incredibly fast and all the time was at its peak, like it was this week. This week was horrendous, if I'm being completely honest. But I think about the experiences I had last week and the people that I interviewed last week, and even early this week. And I think those were the happiest because I could actually sit down and have conversations with people and learn things, which is always fantastic. And to be able to be with such esteemed people and people I respect so much, whether they were professors or whether they were just guest artists, I think that was a really joyous occasion to have. And when were you the least happy? I really hit a point yesterday or today where I wouldn't mind throwing my computer in a fire and never touching the internet again. And although it's like, I say it and it sounds stupid, there is like absolutely a point of truth with that. I don't want to touch Final Cut Pro again. I don't want to have to be so addicted to looking at this Instagram feed. I guess that coupled with having really poor sleep in gallery wasn't great either. So when you're starting the day exhausted, you're not going to kind of pep yourself up. And I found myself being quite testy, and obviously that's something that I'm not proud of, but I guess I'd find myself being frustrated, having to explain over and over and over and over again what the project is, when sometimes I didn't really understand what the project was because it's so vast. There were so many things to explore with it that it's really hard to put that down to something that's like a really succinct art out of all of that. So I guess the latter half of this week was not great at all. And I also felt like quite a huge sense of loneliness as well, that I couldn't see the people outside of this project that otherwise I would have been able to see already. It did feel kind of quite isolating, and the amount of work that I was doing was all consuming, and that was really tough. And I really feel for people who are creating content on their own and throwing themselves into it to the point where they can't reach out to anyone else because they're so busy with doing this. So that was really, really very tough. How has this experience changed your relationship with social media? I don't want to touch social media ever again after this. And I think I'll believe that for a week, and then I think I'll go like, oh no, that's fine, I love Instagram again and I love doing all of this. But being on the side of someone who, originally starting this, I was not someone who posted on social media because I was mostly ashamed of myself and ashamed of the content that I would put out would not be as good and not be as relevant as my peers. To then kind of like blindly put out so much content and continue delivering post after post after post the amount of work that goes into the back of these posts, as people might have seen from tuning into the live streams, was just excessive. Like, it absolutely is insane, and I understand why people have whole teams and whole social media teams behind them to create this content for them, because I'm so sure someone who's like a wellness influencer is not living a particularly well life if it's just themselves. Like, there is this art of like turning on the camera, and you've got to take things various times and doing all of that. So I think that for a while I want to step away from social media. After this, I want to delete all the accounts related to Self-Care Forever off my phone because that was a big thing, was that I've just been like checking it incessantly for the most part of 2 weeks. Is like the first thing I thought of when I woke up and the last thing I thought of when I went to sleep. So I really want to step away from that. But I think that I think to the interview I did with Elise, and I think that it's also not particularly healthy for me to just be a bystander whilst taking part in social media anyway, because that inherently is having a negative effect on how I'm seeing myself. And that maybe I do need to be more honest with the personal content that I post to make sure that I'm having a healthy relationship with social media. Whether I put that into practice, I don't know. I mean, probably not. I'll say all of these things and I'll probably go completely dead silent on social media again, and that'll just be the case. But I think that I want to take a break now, and then I think I want to focus on creating content very sporadically that can help me engage with social media. And maybe it is just like commenting on other people's stuff rather than just being like quite a silent bystander. If I can start by engaging with other people's things, then maybe I'll be brave enough to actually post my own longer lasting content. Because really, I only feel comfortable with posting a story that's, 24 hours. But the fact of something being online quite permanently is still a really difficult thing to think about. So yeah, that's good. That's a bit dark, isn't it? Do you feel like you've been successful in your journey? Well, as far as wellness influencing, I didn't hit it big time, but I am really proud of the work that I've done. And I don't think I'm going to believe that until I wait for a moment and step back and look at the experience as a whole. I think it's taken like a lot of work to put all of this stuff together. I'm stoked that we got 150 followers on Instagram. And the hot majority of those came, within the last 2 weeks. So that's really awesome. I'm stoked that the content that I want to have out there is out there. And some of it's tongue-in-cheek and some of it's not. And some of it's quite genuine. And I really like the idea of having that content out there that hopefully can service other people. So, I mean, if we're looking at it as purely a social media numbers game, I didn't hit 1 million followers or anything like that, but for the work that I did in 2 weeks, I don't think I could have done it better, I suppose. I have worked myself to the bone, and I am exhausted and tired, and I don't think there was anything else that I could have done to help me boost those numbers without paying for something which I think, is intrinsically wrong and it's not part of the experiment whatsoever. So those are the questions. That's my wrap up. That's my reflection. Is there anything else that I wanted to say upon living in a gallery for 2 weeks? I guess the only other thing, and I think it was something that I've been reflecting on with people that have come and visited, is that it's really it's really hard to be on all the time, and it feels like to an extent I have been on for 2 weeks. I've been performing online, but also like for a live stream and for people that are coming in, and that's really hard to like maintain that level of on. So I'm really looking forward to going home and turning off. And I think that people who broadcast their lives to such an extent might agree with that fact as well. But that's been quite a mentally exhausting part of the project, I suppose. But that's it. That's really all I've got. Hopefully that was concise and 20 minutes long. Hey, but that's all I've got for you. That's the channel. That's the experiment. It's done. I don't know whether we'll re-pick it up. You'll have to stay subscribed and find out. But that's all that I've got for you today, and that's all I've got for you for this past 2 weeks. That's all I could do, and I hope you enjoyed some of the content. Even if you enjoyed one piece of the content, then I've done my job. But yeah, I'm going to edit this. I've got 25 minutes to go. I am going to render and get it ready, and that's going to be it. So, one final time, thanks so much for watching. I guess I won't see you in another video. I guess I'll just see you around. Bye.